"You're a useless child." Father smiled as he gave my sibling everything. "They deserve it, you don't." As he signed the papers, the lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Actually, you should know. My name is Emma Caldwell. I'm 35, and for the last 10 years I've been working with displaced families and building housing programs in Southeast Asia. I never thought I'd come back home to Oregon for anything more than a holiday dinner, but when my father called and said he wanted the whole family together, I flew in with the kind of hope I didn't even realize I still carried." The lake house looked the same. Slate blue walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of modern elegance my father always insisted on made a statement. The statement was clear. He was still in control. I walked in carrying nothing but a single overnight bag and a nervous knot in my chest. My younger brother Liam greeted me first. His handshake was stiff, his eyes darting away like we were strangers meeting out of obligation. My stepmother, elegant as ever in her pearl necklace and practiced smile, offered a quiet nod. Then there was my father, Douglas Caldwell, wealthy, brilliant, impossible to please. His embrace lasted exactly 1 second longer than polite. We sat at the long oak table near the fireplace, the wind brushing against the glass behind us. Small talk came and went like background noise. My father barely looked at me as he spoke, but when he did, it was only to confirm what I already feared. This wasn't just a dinner, this was a handover. "Congratulations, Liam," he said, pushing a thick envelope across the table. "You've earned it. The estate, the business, the accounts, all of it." For a moment, no one moved. Then Liam reached out his hand, shaking slightly, as he picked up the envelope. I glanced at him, but he didn't meet my eyes. Not once. I sat still, hands in my lap, knees tight together. I didn't say a word. My father turned toward me with the kind of smirk that had haunted my teenage years. "And you, Emma, always chasing a cause, too soft, too dreamy." He leaned back in his chair like he was presenting a case study in failure. My heart thudded against my ribs, but I didn't respond. I'd spent years learning how to sit through this kind of judgment without flinching. He looked at the attorney seated beside him, a silver-haired man named Harold Moore, and gestured toward the documents. "Let's make it official," he said. "Please don't," I said quietly. It was the only thing I could get out. My voice cracked around the edges, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything I wanted to scream and couldn't. "You made your choice, Emma," he said without looking at me. "You left. You abandoned this family for your little projects overseas. And what did that give you? No title, no legacy, nothing." I should have been used to this, but it still hit like it always did. My stepmother shifted in her seat, avoiding my eyes. Liam folded his hands on the envelope, silent. There was a silence that stretched too long. My fingers curled around the napkin on my lap, just to stay grounded. That's when Mr. Moore cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, "before anyone signs, there's something that must be addressed." My father frowned, impatient. "What now?" Mr. Moore looked directly at him, his voice steady. "There's a sealed amendment to the will. It was submitted 6 years ago at the request of your late mother, my grandmother, the only person in the family who ever made me feel like I was enough just by being myself." "What amendment?" my father snapped. She had no authority. Mr. Moore didn't flinch. She did. Until her death, she held a controlling interest in Caldwell Enterprises, and she had every legal right to file an amendment. Liam sat up straighter, his face no longer calm. My stepmother's hand tightened around her wine glass, her lips pressed into a thin line. I stayed frozen. Still. But something inside me flickered. Mr. Moore reached into his leather folder and pulled out a yellowing envelope. He placed it gently on the table like it was something sacred. "Miss Caldwell," he said, "would you like to read it, or shall I?" My eyes stayed locked on the envelope in Liam's hands. I barely turned toward Mr. Moore. "You read it," I whispered. He unfolded the document and began. "In the event that my granddaughter Emma Caldwell is deemed unworthy by her father, I hereby grant her full authority over my share of Caldwell Enterprises. This clause, once triggered, overrides any prior agreements regarding estate distribution and company leadership." The room fell still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. "What does that mean?" My father barked, half rising from his chair. "It means," Mr. Moore said calmly, "that Emma is now the controlling shareholder. Nothing signed tonight can change that." My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the tile, his fists clenched. "This is ridiculous. She doesn't know the business. She doesn't know anything." "Maybe not your version of it," I said, standing too. "But I know how to build. I know how to lead. And I'm not afraid of doing it differently." The air between us thickened, tense and electric. I turned toward Mr. Moore. "Let's proceed," I said. "We have a company to run." My voice didn't shake this time. It didn't need to. For the first time, I didn't feel small in that room. I felt ready, not to win, but to begin. The paper in Mr. Moore's hand seemed to hum with electricity. His voice, steady and formal, filled the room with words that shifted the ground beneath us. As he read, I kept my eyes on my father, watching the disbelief drain the color from his face. The amendment was clear. If my father ever attempted to disinherit me, the shares held by my grandmother would pass directly to me, effective immediately. It wasn't up for discussion. It was already in motion. Douglas leaned forward, his palms flat against the table. His breath came shallow, his eyes wild with the need to undo something that had already been sealed in ink and law. He barked something at Mr. Moore, but the lawyer didn't flinch. He only repeated the clause. She filed this while she was still alive. It was reviewed. It was legal. Liam shifted in his seat, the envelope still resting under his palm. He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the table, like maybe if he stared hard enough, this moment would disappear. My stepmother reached for her necklace, fingers trembling around the pearls. Her silence said more than words could. I felt it then. Not joy, not victory, something quieter, something older, like the echo of all the times I'd sat at that same table and swallowed my voice to keep the peace. Only this time the silence didn't belong to me. I stood, slowly. The chair legs scraped the hardwood, and the sound was sharp, clean, final. I didn't look at Liam. I didn't look at her. I looked directly at the man who told me I was too soft to survive. "I'm not here to take revenge," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "I'm here to honor what was entrusted to me, and I won't run from that." My father's jaw worked, but no words came. His fists clenched again. He looked at Mr. Moore like he could will this back to the way it was. But he couldn't. That power was gone. It had shifted, and everyone in that room felt it. Not because I yelled, but because I finally stood still in the center of my truth. Mr. Moore nodded once respectfully. Then he turned the folder toward me. "When you're ready," he said. And I was. "Mr." Moore cleared his throat again, but this time it wasn't legal language he spoke. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small wooden box, the edges worn smooth by time. He placed it in front of me with the same quiet care someone might use to set down something sacred. "This was hers," he said softly. "She asked that I give it to you only if today ever happened." I stared at it, afraid to move. My fingers hovered just above the lid. Then I lifted it. Inside was her compass. The same one I used to play with when I was little, when she'd tell me stories about how it helped her find her way home during a storm on the Pacific. Its gold edges were still warm, like it had been waiting. Beneath it was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the corners. My name was written across the front in her delicate script. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and picked it up. The room fell away as I opened it. It didn't matter who was still seated around me. For that moment, it was just me and her. "My dearest Emma," it began. "If you're reading this, it means your father has done what I hoped he wouldn't. I wish I could tell you I'm surprised. But more than anything, I wish I could be there beside you." "You were never weak," the letter said. "You were always the quiet strength holding everything together, even when no one noticed. That's the kind of power this world tries to dismiss because it can't control it." My vision blurred. I blinked fast. I kept reading. "I'm giving you this compass because I trust your direction, not just where you go, but how you lead, with empathy, with dignity, with the kind of grace that doesn't ask to be seen, but changes everything when it is." I reached the end. There was no grand declaration, no big sweeping goodbye, just this: "You don't have to fight to prove your worth, Emma. You just have to stand where you are and trust that it's enough." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. I held the compass for a moment longer. Its needle pointed true steady, just like her. When I looked up, no one spoke. Not my father, not Liam, not even Mr. Moore. But something had shifted. Not in them, in me. For years I thought power was something loud, something you had to take by force. But holding that letter, I understood what she always meant when she said stillness was a strength of its own. I slipped the compass into my pocket. My hands stopped shaking. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt anchored. I felt ready. The building hadn't changed. Same glass doors, same marble floors, same tension in the air. Only this time, I wasn't a visitor. I was the one with the key. No one rolled out a welcome mat. People nodded because they had to, not because they meant it. Their eyes said everything their mouths didn't. On the first day, I walked through the departments without saying much. I watched how they moved, how conversations stopped when I got close. The office felt more like a fortress than a workplace. Doors stayed closed. Desks were lined up like barriers, not stations. Even the light felt colder than I remembered. Every meeting was filled with tight voices and sidelong glances. Managers gave updates with practiced smiles, but none of them looked me in the eye. I could feel the undercurrent. They were waiting for me to mess up. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't make speeches. I listened. I asked quiet questions and paid attention to what went unsaid. Late on the second day, I walked into the break room. It was nearly empty, just the hum of a vending machine and the smell of burnt coffee. Maria was wiping down a counter. She paused when she saw me. She had been with the company longer than anyone else still standing. 27 years, someone had whispered. She said nothing at first, just nodded and went back to cleaning. I pulled out a chair and sat. She blinked. That's when I realized sitting wasn't allowed when Liam walked in. She stood up straighter like she expected to be scolded. I told her to sit. Eat. Take a minute. She stared for a second before slowly lowering herself into the chair across from me. Her hands were still tense. We didn't speak right away, but I stayed. Sometimes silence is the only honest thing in a room full of pretending. The next morning she left a cup of tea on my desk. No note, just the cup, still warm. By the third day I had found the budget logs. The numbers didn't add up. Promotions were tied to loyalty, not performance. Bonuses went to the loudest voices, not the hardest workers. There were entire departments that hadn't had new equipment in 5 years. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was a system built on fear. Liam hadn't just learned it. He had perfected it. I started writing notes, highlighting patterns, documenting names. But what I needed most wasn't on paper. It was in the way Maria looked at me that afternoon and said quietly that it didn't used to be like this. That's when I knew I wasn't here to reclaim power. I was here to undo damage, and I wasn't alone. Maria never called herself loyal. She didn't have to. Loyalty, the real kind, doesn't shout. It notices who stays when no one's watching. And I noticed her. In the quiet corners between closed doors and whispered doubts, we started building something new. Not with orders, with trust. He showed up without warning. Just walked into my office one morning, folder in hand, a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. I barely had time to stand before he tossed the folder onto my desk. "You want the CEO seat," he said. "Let's see how long you keep it." Inside were screenshots, emails, and grainy photos tied to my years working in nonprofit housing. The accusations were brutal: misused funds, personal enrichment, fabricated deals. None of it was real. But it didn't matter. By afternoon, my name was trending. Headlines ran with phrases like charity fraud and family feud at Caldwell Enterprises. My inbox flooded. My phone didn't stop. Shareholders panicked. I tried to hold it together. I told myself it would pass. Truth always rises. But behind the closed door of my office, I sat on the couch and felt my chest cave in. Maybe my father had been right. Maybe I wasn't built for this world. I wasn't tough enough. I wasn't ruthless enough. I didn't know how to fight like they did. The room was quiet, but inside my head it wasn't. I couldn't hear anything but the thudding rhythm of self-doubt. Then came a knock, soft, hesitant. Before I could answer, the door creaked open. Maria stepped inside, holding a paper cup of tea. "You look like you needed it," she said simply. I tried to smile, but I couldn't find the strength. She sat down without waiting for permission. "I used to cry in this room too," she said. "No one ever brought me anything. Maybe it's time that changed." Something in me cracked. Not loudly, just a slow, quiet ache that let the air back in. She looked at me with something I hadn't felt from anyone in days. Not pity, not panic, just presence. "You always looked me in the eye," she said. "Not many people do. You treated me like I mattered even when you didn't have power. That says more than titles ever will." I blinked hard, trying to keep from unraveling again. She reached across and touched my hand just for a second. "Don't let this moment define you. You know who you are. That's what scares them most." When she left, I sat alone for a while, tea cooling in my hand. The storm outside had passed, but the one inside hadn't. Not yet. Still I stood. I walked to the window. I breathed. He wanted me to break. That was the point. But I wasn't broken. I was bruised. There's a difference. And thanks to Maria, I remembered it. The boardroom was packed. Every seat filled, every face tense. Papers shuffled, murmurs echoed, and not one eye avoided mine. I stood at the head of the table, palms flat against the wood. My heart was steady. My voice needed to be just as clear. "I know what's been said," I began. "I know what some of you believe, and I know what Liam wanted you to fear." There was a beat of silence. Then someone scoffed. Another board member folded his arms. One leaned forward and asked if I'd be resigning today. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. "If anyone here can prove those documents are real," I said, "I'll step down right now." They didn't answer. Instead, I placed a folder in the center of the table and opened it. Inside were the original reports, financial audits, internal memos, a trail of inconsistencies tied to shell companies and padded contracts. Everyone traced back to Liam. Then I turned on the projector. Footage played. A time-stamped video of Liam entering a locked office after hours, plugging in a USB drive, transferring files. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the projector. I let the silence sit, let the truth do what shouting never could. "This company isn't just a name," I said. "It's a promise. Or at least it used to be." More silence. Then one of the oldest board members, Mr. Halpern, leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "You reminded me," he said quietly. "Why did we start this place in the first place?" I nodded once. Not out of pride, out of understanding. "I'm not here to destroy Liam," I said. "I'm here to repair what he damaged, not for revenge, for the people still working here who deserve better." I turned to the company attorney. "Liam is suspended pending a full investigation. No charges, not yet. But no more secrets either." Some nodded, some didn't, but no one argued. As I gathered my papers, I felt something shift. Not a victory, a recognition. The kind that doesn't show up in headlines, but in how people look at you when they finally see you for who you are. I walked out without applause, without a single handshake. But that didn't matter. I wasn't there for approval. I was there to lead. And this time, no one followed me out. But no one stood in my way either. The morning after the boardroom meeting, the office felt different. Not louder, just more awake. Like the walls themselves had exhaled after holding tension for too long. I didn't rush to change everything. I started small. Letters went out to every employee who had been let go for speaking up. No demands, no explanations required. Just an invitation. If you want to return, the door is open. Some replied within hours. Others waited. Some never responded at all. That was okay. Healing doesn't look the same for everyone. Maria handed me the last envelope to sign. She smiled when I asked her to stay a minute. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. By the end of the week, a few desks had filled back in. One department restarted its weekly lunches. A quiet memo about restructured leadership floated across inboxes. We didn't rebuild overnight, but we started. Then one Sunday morning, I walked into my office and found him sitting there. My father. Same tailored coat, same upright posture. But something in his eyes had shifted. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask to sit. He just placed a photo on my desk. I recognized it instantly. I at 12, face smeared with paint, standing beside my grandmother on the porch, both of us laughing. "She said you'd change this family," he said quietly. I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the photo again, at the joy in her face. The freedom is mine. I remembered that day like it was yesterday. He pulled a folded document from his pocket. A donation receipt, 7 figures, directed to the nonprofit I worked for before coming back. No speech, no apology, just that. I met his eyes. For the first time, I saw something more than pride or disappointment. I saw someone who understood what it meant to lose the thing he never thought he had to earn. "Thank you," I said softly. Not because I forgave everything, but because I saw the effort. He nodded once, then stood. I didn't ask him to stay. He didn't ask to explain. Some moments end better in stillness. After he left, I placed the photo next to my grandmother's compass. Then I got back to work. Legacy isn't about whose name is on the plaque. It's not about who built the tallest building or ran the longest meeting. It's about who made others feel seen, who turned power into something that helped instead of hurt. That's the kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind, one that didn't need defending, one that spoke for itself in the silence that followed. If you've ever been told you're not enough, I want you to hear me now, not as a CEO, not as someone who won anything, but as someone who sat in rooms where her voice was ignored, as someone who was told her softness made her weak. For years I thought power looked like the loudest voice. I thought it was about taking up space and proving people wrong. I spent so much time bracing myself for the next dismissal, the next quiet rejection wrapped in polite words. But it's not power if it makes you lose yourself. Real strength doesn't need to crush anything. It holds steady even when everything else shakes. I used to believe I had to become someone else to be taken seriously. I tried to speak the way they spoke, stand the way they stood, and still it wasn't enough. Then I remembered what my grandmother used to say. The wind doesn't move because it shouts. It moves because it knows where it's going. So I stopped shouting. I started listening. I started standing still. That's when things began to change. Not all at once, but enough to remind me I didn't have to earn respect through fear or fight. I know what it feels like to sit in a room where no one expects you to lead, to hear people whisper that you're too emotional, too idealistic, too naive. I've heard every version of those words. I just stopped letting them shape me. You don't have to twist yourself into someone else's mold to be worthy. Your truth exactly as it is holds more weight than 1,000 loud voices echoing nothing. If you've been overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, I'm not here to say it doesn't hurt. It does. Deeply. But hurt and hopeless are not the same thing. You can carry pain and still choose grace. You can carry doubt and still lead with vision. The two are not enemies. What matters is that you don't let those who never saw your value become the ones who define it. You get to decide what kind of legacy you leave behind. Not by proving anyone wrong, but by living in a way that feels right. For me, that looked like creating a space where people felt safe again, where no one was too small to be seen, where compassion wasn't a liability, but a compass. The most powerful thing I ever did wasn't taking the title. It was keeping my integrity when it would have been easier to burn everything down. And I want to say this to anyone listening who's in that place right now, whether it's your family, your job, or just your own fear whispering that you'll never be enough, don't give up. You don't have to scream. You don't have to fight to be someone else. You just have to stand steady in your truth and let that be the thing that moves the world around you. Because it will. Now, if any part of my story felt familiar, if it stirred something in you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part hit the hardest. Or tell me your own story. I read every single one because connection is what this journey has always been about. And if you believe in strength that heals instead of harms, if you believe in kindness as power, then hit subscribe. Because the world needs more of us leading from the quiet places. The ones that don't demand attention but earn respect one steady step at a time.